Hello international students and welcome to our online visa extension workshop. My name is Susanna Baragib and I am an international student advisor at the University of Exeter. In this video, part 2 of our workshop, I will explain how to calculate the finances you need to show for your visa application. This is complicated, so give me your full attention and let's get started. The Tier 4 student visa rules about finances are extremely strict. The basic rule is simple enough. You must show that you have enough money to pay your first year's tuition fees, plus up to 9 months worth of living expenses. Okay, it is a bit more complicated than that. You need to know exactly what first year's tuition fee means in your situation, because some of you may not be applying during your first year of study. And up to 9 months? So how many months maintenance do you need to show, and how much per month? I'll explain each of these areas in detail and then put them together with some examples. So let's look at tuition fees first. If you have not yet started your course, you will need to show that you have the full amount of your first year's tuition fees. If your course is only 1 year long, you need to show all of your tuition fees. It doesn't matter if you pay your fees in instalments, the Home Office wants to see that you can pay the entire year now. You don't have to pay everything immediately, but you'll need to show that you have the money in your bank or through sponsorship. If you have already started your course, you need to show that you have the tuition fees for your current year. So if you are currently in your second year, you need to show the full amount of your second year's tuition fees. The only exception to this is if you are applying during the summer vacation. In this case, you'll need to show next year's fees, not the ones you paid last year. The correct amount of tuition fees that you need to show will be on your CAS statement. CAS stands for Confirmation of Acceptance for Studies and is the method by which the university directly informs the Home Office of the details of your study programme. A full explanation of what a CAS is and how you can get one is in part 3 documentation video. If you have not received your CAS yet, you can find out how much you will need to pay for your tuition fees in the student finance section of the university website. Your CAS will also show any payments you have made towards your tuition fees, which brings us on to our next point. If you have already paid some of your tuition fees, you can deduct the amount that you have paid from the total that you need to show in your account. However, you can only deduct the amount you have paid if the payment has been made before your CAS was issued, or if you have an official finance receipt. This is because the amount you show must match the outstanding tuition fee amount on your CAS. We will do some examples later in this presentation. Now, let's look at living expenses. The rule is that if you are studying outside of London, you need to show at least £1,015 per month for living expenses, up to a maximum of 9 months. How much you need to show depends on the length of your course and the number of months remaining. If you are an Exeter student and you are applying for a visa extension to complete your course, you will need to show £1,015 for each of the remaining months if it is less than 9 months. There are slightly different requirements if you are applying under the doctorate extension scheme. Please refer to the relevant information on our website. Let's do some calculations. If you are starting a new course or you are returning from a long interruption and your course of study will last 9 months or longer, you will need to show £9,135. If your course is shorter than 9 months, you can show £1,015 for each month of your course. For example, a 3-month course, you should show 3 multiplied by 1,015, which is equal to £3,045. Please note, this amount includes accommodation, so you don't need to show extra money for your accommodation costs. So, you don't have to show any extra money for accommodation. However, if you have paid money to the university accommodation, not private accommodation, you can deduct up to £1,265 from the total amount of living expenses you need to show. For example, if you have paid £2,000 towards your university accommodation in Lefrauda, you can deduct £1,265 from the amount of maintenance you need to show. Here's an example. If you are on a 9-month course, you can subtract £1,265 from £9,135, meaning you will need to show £7,870 for your living expenses. Another example, if you are on a 3-month course or you are a continuing Exeter student and you have 3 months left to study, you can subtract £1,265 from £3,045, meaning you will need to show £1,780 for your living expenses. Remember, these deductions can only be made if the payment has been made to the university for accommodation, and the amount that you have paid is detailed on your CAS statement. Okay, I know it's a lot to take in, but let's put it together with some more examples. It will make more sense. If you're studying maths or business, this is a good opportunity to practice. Our first example. Let's look at a new first-year student on BA Accounting and Finance who has not studied in the UK previously. Their tuition fees are £17,500 and they've paid £2,000 already. They are in university accommodation and have paid £1,700. What money do they need to show? Let's think this through. On the left, the student's tuition fees are £17,500. He has paid £2,000 towards them, so he needs to show £15,500 for tuition fees. On the right, he's on a 3-year course, so his living expenses are £9,135. He has paid £1,700 for university accommodation, but only payments up to a maximum of £1,265 can be deducted. So he needs to show £7,870 for living expenses. If we add these two figures together, in total the student needs to show £23,370 in his bank account. For our next example, let's look at a student doing a PhD in politics. This student is in her 4th year with only 3 months remaining on her course and is in continuation status, which means at the moment she doesn't have to pay any tuition fees. She has paid £5,000 for private accommodation. Now we'll look at the answer together. This student doesn't have to pay any tuition fees for this year. So on the left, she doesn't have to have any tuition fee money in her bank account. Remember, she's a continuing student, currently enrolled, and only has 3 months remaining on her course. Therefore, she only needs to show 3 months' worth of living expenses, which equals to £3,045. She can't make any deductions for her accommodation payment because it was made to a private company and not to the university. So the total she needs to show is £3,045. Okay, but how do I show I have this money? Good question. You need to know which of these categories you fall into. If you are funded by your parents or you pay for your own studies, you are self-financed. If your government or international company or major scholarship organisation, such as the British Council, is funding your studies, we will call you a sponsored student. If you are funded by the university through a studentship or scholarship, it will make it easier if we call you a scholarship student. Self-financed students need to show bank statements. Sponsored students need to show a letter from their sponsor. And those with University of Exeter scholarships will show these funds on their CAS statement or in a separate letter from the university. If you're a self-financed student, you will usually need to show the money in a bank account. The exact documentation you need to show is covered later in part 3, the documentation section, and you should pay close attention to this. The important thing to know here, however, is that the total amount must be in your bank account for at least 28 days before you apply for your visa. If it is there for less than 28 days, or the amount in the account drops below the required amount, even for 1 day, your visa application will be refused. This really is the most important thing you need to know when you're applying for a Tier 4 visa. Now, if you're a sponsored student, it's a bit easier. You will just need to show an official letter from your sponsor, described again in the documentation video later. But you need to check that your sponsor is paying at least £1,015 per month for your living expenses and all of your tuition fees. As long as this is the case, you don't need to worry too much about the calculations. If your sponsor is not paying all of your fees, and they are paying less than £1,015 per month for your living expenses, you will need to show the remainder in your bank account. This can be tricky to calculate, so contact the International Student Support Office for help with this. Finally, if you get a fee scholarship from a university, you should just deduct the scholarship amount from the total fees and the remainder in your bank account like a self-financed student. If you receive full or part studentship, however, you need to check if all of your fees are covered and at least £1,015 per month for living expenses, in the same way as a sponsored student. If not, you will need to show the remainder in your bank account. Your scholarship or studentship details should be included on your CAS statement or in a separate letter officially from your department. I hope this has helped you understand the finance rules. Now, try and calculate the amount you need to show and be sure that you watch the documentation video to explain how you must show it. Most importantly, if you have any questions at all, contact the International Student Support Office.